Okay, at this time, we would call our meeting to order. I would be doing so on behalf of the Roanoke Rapids City Council, and we're honored and privileged to have the Roanoke Rapids Planning Board here with us tonight, Ms. Sherry Mills as their chair, and at this time, I'd like for her to call her meeting to order.
The Planning Board is called to order, and we're also honored to work alongside and hear the same information as you guys tonight.
All right.
Make
Thank
some
you, ma'am.
decisions.
That being said, I'd like to offer an invocation at this time. Dear Heavenly Father, we see your hand at work as the summer season gives way to the colors of the fall, the autumn. So many things that we see, we don't understand, but we strive to trust and obey in your word. Our prayers continue to go out to those in Hawaii that have been so deeply affected through the loss of loved ones, the loss of homes, and the loss of jobs. Those in Ohio still wondering what their future holds for that community. Many amongst us in our own community have hardships to deal with each and every day. Lord, may your presence be known to them, even when one's thoughts so that all is lost. May they take comfort and refuge in your promise that you will never abandon us. We continue to trust and obey, for there's no other way. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, we'd like to stand and have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Planning Board members, have you had a chance to look over the agenda to see if you have any conflicts with the items? If not, I would ask for a motion to adopt our agenda as written.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Do we? Okay, sounds great. All in favor? Everybody? Great. Sounds good.
Okay, and likewise, the City Council, you've had an opportunity to review the agenda as it is presented. Need a motion to approve it as it is, or if there's any amendments need to be made, do so at this time.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a motion that we adopt the business agenda with an addition to adding 5A public comment.
Second.
Okay, have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Farabee and a second by Councilman Smith. Is there any more discussion on this matter? There is none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The agenda would be approved as it is amended. Next, I would call on Ms. Traynham, our city manager, to make a presentation before we open the public hearing.
Oops. Good evening, Mayor and Council and members of the Planning Board. We appreciate everyone being here tonight, and I see some new faces on the board that I haven't seen on the Planning Board, so welcome. It feels good to be at the podium tonight. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is to process a request for amendments to the city's land use ordinance. And with that, the Planning Board has to review and make a recommendation, as well as there being a public hearing and for City Council to have the ultimate approval of the matter. We have been, we've been encouraged to try to process this request. And the request is to add the term casino as a permissible use in the entertainment overlay district and to add a definition to that. Some may say, all right, well, what does that mean? Well, really, the state legislature, if kept up with any of the news right now, there have been some talks and some discussions. So no matter what, even if it's approved in our ordinance, we're kind of subject to any state or federal laws that would enable any sort of activities. The state or the city, since 2005, when it created the entertainment overlay district, and then that turned into renovation of property, creation of roads, and the development of the Roanoke Rapids Theater, as part of the grand plan was that this was going to be a certain area with specific uses that are allowed, that are driven towards entertainment, and economic development, tourism, job development, and to be developed for commercial entertainment purposes. And so only those in Chapter 24 or Article 24, the land use ordinance, only those uses are allowed in the entertainment district that are specifically narrowed down to. With that being said, and with the timeline with the state legislature, and there are some unknowns, I will go ahead and acknowledge that. For the purpose of processing tonight, a joint meeting of the planning board and the city council will help to kind of expedite this process in some ways, but also allow for a timely presentation, as well as the planning board hearing it and the city council hearing any public comments or any discussion and so forth at the same time. So you really have a benefit of hearing everything together, where one board hears one presentation and another board hears another. And sometimes we've had citizens over time, they'll show up to the planning board and offer comments, and then they don't come to city council meeting, and so they kind of don't know which meeting to choose. So a joint meeting is in effect for tonight. So just to kind of put out a housekeeping item for this, I'll talk for a few more minutes about the proposed language, and then we'll hear from the applicant as well, and then the planning board will deliberate and make its recommendations. There's a recommendation of consistency, as well as a recommendation for city council for its take on whether to approve or adopt the legislation. Anything that the planning board says as far as their recommendation, it doesn't hold, the council doesn't have to follow suit per se. It's not even enforceable, or it was part of the court of law if it was challenged. The planning board recommendation is a recommendation, and the council has the ultimate decision-making authority, but the only requirement by state legislature is that the planning board reviews it and has an opportunity to provide a recommendation prior to any action by the council, and also a public hearing. So, we've gotten that out of the way. Also with the city council, when it comes time for your consideration after the planning board conducts its business, again, you'll have your statement of consistency, that the action is follows the process that's prescribed and is reasonable, and then also consideration of the approval of ordinance 2023.11, which would approve the text that's been presented. If any changes are discussed or occur as a result of any approval, then that would have to be mentioned as well. So this public hearing has been properly advertised in the Daily Herald, as well as on our Spin and the city's website, and posted in other areas. So citizen comment, we've met that requirement to do so. Citizens had the option to submit any written comments that's allowed under the statutes. Those comments were requested to be submitted by noon last week on August the 31st, and no comments were received to date. I have not received any correspondence, and I verified with the planning department earlier that they have not received any calls or questions or comments concerning the public hearing and the item being proposed. So the proposed text amendment is, well, there's technically two changes. One, to add a definition of the term casino. That term has been provided in your packets as an amendment to Article 2, which is our section of the code that provides definitions and interpretations to be used. Then in Article 24 for the overlay district, to add casino as a use that is permissible by right, which means they have to come apply for a zoning permit for the authorization of the use. Staff has found that the request is consistent with the land use plan. There's some policies that are enclosed in here that are reflected in the statement and recommendation of consistency. For planning board, we use recommendation of consistency, city council, statement of consistency to align with recommendations and final decisions. Our comprehensive plan that was adopted in 2014 encourages, encourages mixed-use development and encourages expanding opportunities supports economic development and community development initiatives, and so forth. So we feel that, from a staff perspective, that we can recommend approval of the proposed text amendments, especially because it is dependent upon what is authorized under state and federal laws. So the requested actions for tonight would be to move forward with having the public hearing, receive any comments, and then allow the planning board time to deliberate and discuss their recommendation, followed by the two motions. And then the city council will take up its part and deliberate, asking questions, and so forth, and for final action. So, are there any questions at this point about the housekeeping matters and so forth, or anything related to the proposed request before we move on? So, no? Okay. I will try to make sure that we stay consistent, or try and keep us all on track here. So, enclosed in your agenda, there is a copy of a letter from Attorney Bill White about this request on behalf of Corita Capital Group, and then a recommended definition, and then also enclosed is a copy of the current Article 24 of the ordinance, so you can see the entertainment district purpose and intent and the other uses that are currently allowed within that district. So you can see there's a variety of things that meet the intent of what the city envisioned for this area about 20 years ago. So I wanted to include that. So, and then planning board members have a recommendation of consistency, and council has the statement. So at this point, I will, unless you have any questions of me from the staff, we'll direct your attention to the applicant here, Mr. Attorney Bill White. Or actually, I'll ask you to open the public hearing first.
Yes. At this time, I would declare that the public hearing would be open to receive comments from the citizens and the applicant. Mr. White?
Chairman Mills, members of the Roanoke Rapids Area Planning Board, and Mayor Dowdy, and members of the Roanoke Rapids City Council. That's the hardest thing I've had to struggle with all day. Who got top billing? So I really felt like, in deference to the planning board being the first order of business, that, and no offense, Mayor, but Sherry's prettier than you are. I am William O. White, Jr., the firm of Wellman & White, PLLC, 644 Roanoke Avenue, Roanoke Rapids, NC. I'm pleased to speak in favor of the zoning text amendments to the Roanoke Rapids Land Use Ordinance. Our firm represents Corita Capital Group, LLC, a North Carolina limited liability company that is the owner of the Roanoke Rapids Theater. With me this afternoon is Bruce L. Tyler of Weldon Mills Properties, LLC, one of the members of Corita Capital Group, LLC. When the city decided to pursue the theater in 2005, at the request of the city and the local government commission, I was involved heavily in the selection of the firm Economic Research Associates to prepare the feasibility study for the theater. The feasibility study, dated April 15, 2005, stated that the theater would be a, quote, market viable attraction concept, provided that these certain assumptions were met. The first assumption was as follows. Key elements of the larger proposed development, including 2 hotels, at least 200,000 square feet of retail, and additional entertainment amusement opportunities are operational by the time the theater is opened. We all know the history since 2005, and the city has sold the theater recently to our client. On May 24, 2005, the Roanoke Rapids City Council adopted the Entertainment Overlay District. Section 151-362 reads in part, the city also strives to enhance the continued development of its commercial areas. The City Council finds the general welfare will be served by orderly development within an entertainment overlay district, EOD, close paren, in a fashion which would preserve natural scenic beauty and enhance trade, tourism, job creation, capital investment, and the general welfare within defined commercially zoned areas within the city and its surrounding areas. We worked with planning to include as many permitted uses as were legal, either by right or by special use. In the winter of 2008-2009, the former owners of Carolina Crossroads were approached by a business broker, St. Louis Capital Partners, LLC, about the possibility of a casino in the entertainment overlay district. For various reasons, it was not pursued. On July 10, 2012, Section 151-150, electronic gaming operations were allowed as an accessory use in the theater and under Section 151-171 in all zoning districts. Consequently, gaming is permitted in Roanoke Rapids. There's legislation being considered in the current session of the General Assembly to permit casinos in entertainment overlay districts. The pending budget bill has as a source of revenue excise tax from the operation of casinos. The considered legislation has been drafted but not yet introduced. Triangle Business Journal, in its August 23, 2023 issue, reported that Republican lawmakers look to create a bill that will allow a casino in 3 counties. WRAL-TV disclosed the draft bill not ready for introduction. The final version of that bill is still a work in progress in the various caucuses, but some of the key points are worth mentioning. In order to be considered, the entertainment district must be, among others, the following: a Tier 1 area, lie east of Interstate 77, be either a border county or a county traversed by Interstate 95, and have a population less than 100,000. The requirements for the applying business include, in part, the following: a submission fee of $25 million as a credit against future excise tax, a gaming license for 30 years subject to an extension, must create 1,750 new jobs subject to penalties for default, must invest at least $500 million in capital expenditure in the district, also subject to penalties for default. The business must have at least 10 years' experience in commercial gaming industry and also must have 10 years in developing and operating mixed-use, non-gaming real estate projects. And then finally, there's an imposition of an excise tax of 22.5% on gross gaming revenues, of which 5% will be returned to the county and municipality to be divided as sales taxes are divided. I could reread all that, but the one thing I want everybody to understand, this draft bill shows just how seriously our General Assembly is looking at casinos. This probably has more due diligence and more detail than any draft legislation I have ever seen in 49 years of practicing law. When our client acquired the theater, a casino was not part of its development plan. It may not become the site for a casino, but it cannot be one without it being a permitted use in the entertainment overlay district. And this is a critical point. Carolina Crossroads is shovel ready. If it's permitted, it's zoned, all the utilities, all the improvements are there. If they were fortunate enough to get a business to do this, it could be built before some of the rest of them would even have their streets and utilities in place. If a casino is presented and if one is built in the theater, the additional ad valorem tax base, new jobs, and tourism dollars will have a tremendous impact on the financial bases of the city of Roanoke Rapids. As a further example, the freestanding casino in Portsmouth, Virginia, is averaging between $20 and $25 million in gross revenues each month. Downtown Portsmouth standalone casino. The casino operating under a tent in Danville, Virginia has averaged $20 million since its opening on May 15, 2023. And if this doesn't get your attention, nothing else tonight that I say will. For June and July 2023, the city of Danville has received $3.8 million in excise tax revenues alone. 2 months, $3.8 million. So I would ask that both boards act favorably on these zoning text amendments to the Roanoke Rapids Land Use Ordinance so that our client will be able to negotiate the best options for the entertainment overlay district. I should be happy to attempt to address any questions that the members of the planning board or city council may have. Thank you.
Ms. Mills, do you want to see if anybody from you has?
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. White? I think you did a very thorough presentation as well, Mr. White. I would say that I did my own research prior to this meeting, and looking at the state map and the requirements for it being east of 77 near the interstates and so forth, the other counties being Rockingham, which is more mid to western, Anderson being southern, and I think Nash was being considered previously. But I think Halifax County is situated to really do well with this type of development. I think it could bring a lot of revenue and so forth. I also read about some of the people that are traveling to Danville and spending the night and so forth, and all the income, the jobs that are created, and all of those things. It's a very impressive package as to what the possibilities for this could bring. So I just wanted to add that for my board.
Yes.
Ms. Tuning,
I have
please.
a question. I'm Carrie Tuning. I'm Dr. Carrie Tuning, and I would just like to know, based upon the history of the Roanoke Rapids Theater and how everything came about, how will this affect the residents of Roanoke Rapids, Halifax County in regards to taxes?
I would think the effect on the residents of the county and all the municipalities would be a positive impact, because you would not be as caught, hamstrung, with the only guaranteed tax revenue being your ad valorem tax base.
So our taxes will go down based upon the casino coming?
That's
None.
a question for your politicians. I would say.
No, I'm just
I would
saying,
say-
based
I would
upon,
say they would be hard pressed to make a tax increase if this additional operation creates the money.
the reason why I'm
that are
asking
being
is
created.
because I live in Roanoke Rapids, over in Becker's Farm, and based upon the taxes that we already have, and I was just wondering, I'm hoping that this would be a good investment. And because of the way the lottery system and gaming situation is already, and because of a lot of times they say it's going back into the education system, the monies that are recouped from this gaming and situation. So I just don't want us to go and relive what happened when they thought that this Roanoke Rapids Theater was going to be like Orlando, Florida. So that's my concern, and I don't, I'm just one person here, and I'm just really concerned. I don't gamble, but other people do, and I heard that it's going to create additional jobs, and things of that nature. And I think that's really great. But I'm also more of a black hat thinker, somebody that's asked a lot of what if questions. What if we go back and relive what happened when the Roanoke Rapids Theater was initially built? That's all the thing I'm asking.
And
Henry,
let me-
I'm sorry.
Let me point out one thing to maybe calm some of your fears. When the theater was initially conceived, it was being done through Amendment 1 monies through the city. What we're asking today is not costing the city one nickel. This is going to be done by outside business investors that are going to commit $25 million to apply. Now, if that doesn't cut away the fly-by-nights and whatever else, I don't know what else does. Committing to over a 5 or 10 year period, and that number it's waffling through the legislation right now, to invest $500 million as a minimum in the district. What would $500 million to your tax base do? Plus the sales tax. And we've got 90,000 cars that go up and down I-95 on a daily basis, weekly basis, whatever the number is. How much easier is it going to be to pull off at 171 or 173 than it is to get to downtown Portsmouth, Virginia?
Yeah, it has a good sound.
So from that point, we're not asking the city to sign up on anything. We just, for my client to be able to play ball in this arena, it's got to be a permitted use. If it's not permitted, we're not in the game. Like the old man says, if you want to win the lottery, you've got to first buy the ticket.
This
And
is
that's-
true. It's also a wonderful catalyst for other businesses to come to our area. If we're going to have that influx of people, you're going to have more lodging needs, you're going to have more dining needs, you're going to have more pull in through our tourism. It really could be the catalyst for, and a springboard for many wonderful things to happen for us. But I'd like to recognize Henry Ford. I
Well,
believe you have a question.
Mr. White answered my question, not my question, my answer to the planning board, that the original was correct. It was with tax money, and this is private investors, so this isn't apples and oranges, you know what I mean? It's two different things. Thank you. Orange, right there.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, Mr. Browning?
Yes, to piggyback on what Mr. Ford said, in the transition in the 90s, when we transitioned from a textile community, city, mill, village, and so forth, it was a traumatic experience to this area. I mean, very bad. So the city looked at ways in which to diversify. And I think what you're saying is that if we're not putting ourselves in a position where we can at least be considered for this type of prosperity, then we're not buying a ticket to the lottery. And there again, it's not costing us, the point that you made, that's why I say you made it very well, it's not costing the city or the taxpayers at this juncture a lot of any tax money. So it's a win-win when I look at it. And one of the things that we have to look at, you said one of the qualifying procedures was that you have to be a tier 1 county and the population. And one of the things that we have to look at, and most of you who are versed with the prosperity zones throughout the state of North Carolina, we're in the wrong prosperity zone. If you don't know what a prosperity zone is, this is when the governor and the state legislature make recommendations for certain facilities, ventures, and economic development to go to certain areas. Well, we're in what we call the Elizabeth City Prosperity Zone, And if you're like most of us, the only time you're going there is when you're going to the Outer Banks. Versus being in the Raleigh prosperity zone, which Nash County is in, and then the prosperity zone where the other county is, they're in larger cities as well. And as a chair lady said, you know, we have the venue, we got the transportation mode, the infrastructure, along with the money that's coming from the government down, that's in place, that we could be considered as we transition to diversifying where we are. We're not going back to textiles anymore. I mean, that's gone. So we need to look at diversifying what we're going to do in the future, because right now, most of you looked at the census, we're losing population. We're not going up, we're going down. And the seniors who graduated from high school a few months ago, the majority of them will be leaving this area and they won't be coming back to their retirement age. They won't be. There are no jobs for their education that they're doing, their training and so forth. So I really look at it as a win-win. We look at diversifying the possibilities that we can look at. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Greg.
Any other questions or comments from the board? If there's no other questions or comments, I move for a motion to consider adoption of go.
We need to proceed with receiving public comments first,
I'm
or citizen
sorry.
comments. And then
I
we'll
didn't have
close
that
the
on my
hearing and move
agenda.
forward.
Excuse me.
Okay, public comment at this time. Anybody that would like to speak for or against this request, if you'd come to the podium, please, and state your name. Mr. McDaniel. Good afternoon, Jerry.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jerry McDaniel. I live at 701 Carolina Street, and I had one question for Mr. White. Do you have an actual traffic count for 95 at that location? I think it's 90 to 375,000. That seems like a big swing. Do you have an actual count? Because I remember 49,000 each way. Okay, because I was remembering one time we had a 40,000 count, and the count up here by what I call Drugstore Road dropped to 3,000. It was kind of like we had a dome over the avenue. But that's all I want to know, if they had a number, a feasible, working, reasonable number. I'd heard one, up to 300,000 vehicles a day both ways. But that was all I wanted to know. Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Thank you, Mr.
I wish you well, and thank y'all for letting me speak.
Yes, sir. Anybody else at this time? Yes, ma'am, Ms. Brewer.
I'm Linda Brewer. I'm just here as a public citizen, because you know I hung around.
Well, we're glad to have you.
Thank you. I've listened to the comments tonight. I know you all have done your work and job, and Bill, you did an excellent job of explaining what we're looking at here. He's right. Things are gone. We're not going back to how we were in the 80s. We have to find a new way to make our community viable financially and as a place people would choose to live. And I think I'm with whomever said this is a win-win. No money coming from the city, no money coming from the county right now either, but we're looking forward to what this project can bring to the county and to the city. And it would certainly help us as the ARPA money and the American Rescue money fades away. That is a one-time, lifetime deal, and it will soon be gone. I am totally in support of this project, and you all have done your homework. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brewer. Anybody from the city council, any comments at this time? Oh, yes, sir. Good afternoon.
Mayor, how's everybody? My name is Kenny Picks. I reside at 519 Henson Street. I would like to know if this casino get built, would it be like the theater? Will homes be taken away from residents? And where would it be built? Because when they built the theater, there was a lot of homes, I guess it would be considered Weldon resident that was taken away in order to build that theater. So I was wondering, wherever this casino gonna be at, will the homes be taken away? Or will it be on private property, or will the city own the land? Okay, that's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hicks. Anybody else from the audience? Anybody from City Council? I'd just like to make a comment about when I came on as the mayor in 2009, that was right at the time when, as the lady from the planning board was mentioning how bad things were, and the city had taken on $27 million worth of debt. I just couldn't imagine ever paying that off. But when you pay on it every month, it's like a 30-year loan. You will eventually get it paid off at some point. And so the city went to work on trying to get the loan renegotiated. Eventually we did, which saved taxpayers quite a bit of money. But the thing that I would like to say is that what Mr. Browning said, when the council, the mayor, and the city manager and everybody, when they broke ground and started working on this project, it was because everybody here would say, we got to have jobs, we got to have jobs. And that was a place that looked like we could get jobs. Nobody knew what was going to happen in 2007. So they did a good job, I think, in putting in the infrastructure, making it ready. And this council, Mr. Furby's the only one that was there when so he's lived through it all, and been a very faithful member to us. Mr. Bobbitt was here for a long time. A lot of the other people left, but they did a good job in putting in the infrastructure and having it ready, and we held on making the payment. Again, I refer back to the planning board person's comment. We didn't hardly have enough money to pay the bills, much less do anything else in the city. And the money, as Ms. Brewer spoke of, that's helped us just like it has you all a lot, but that money's going to play out and it'll be gone. It's a one-time deal. Property tax, sales tax, any other kind of fees that would be generating these jobs, that would be an ongoing thing. So it's a real game changer, so to speak, if we can be fortunate enough to have this. I also think back when I was a much younger person, we were probably one of the last counties in the state that didn't have liquor by the drink. And everybody, I mean, it just upset the whole community when they even started talking about it. And it was just going to be the downturn of our town. And I don't really think it's had a real adverse effect on us. Might not add quite as much public financial benefit as people thought. I don't know. I don't see the figures, but I don't think that has had a real negative impact on us. People are going to gamble. They're going to smoke. They're going to drink. That doesn't mean you have to do it. But all things in moderation, and I think $3 or $4 million would be a nice moderate figure for us to bring in each month, since our budget is only about $16 million for the whole year. So that's it's hard to fathom, but that is really a lot of money, and it can make we've been talking for 14 years, I know, about what we can do to make our community so people want to come here, not so that people want to leave here, which is somebody said out there a minute ago. And a lot of those things have happened now, so we got a chance to move forward. So I thank you.
Mayor, if I may, since you brought out that I was one of the members on the board. So
Picking on you.
I feel compelled to say something. And when I came to town here, I was looking at the mill, and the mill, as was said already, was 4,000 people. Went from that to 2,500, and I was looking at that along with others. Went from that to 1,500. Went down to 400 where they're just packing stuff, and at that point it was the mills are gone, as has already been said. So the idea came along that an entertainment district would work. As you well know, as history has it, there were things that happened in relation to the economy and that made it not happen. But at the same time, the concept is finally looking like it's coming around after so many years. Now, for those that were in that initially, the belief was that it would happen, just didn't know when. Now, at this point, we're hoping that it will happen. So I think this will live up to one of its original intents. Now, when the overlay district came, there were trips to Branson and all these other places that had these kinds of gaming and casinos or whatever. So at that point, the legislative was not coming to North Carolina, so that part wasn't put in there at that particular time. Now that it is, I believe that it will be wise for us to consider that and get on the table. So that's my comment.
Okay, Ms. Trainer?
Mr. Mayor, just ask that if anyone else from any other persons in attendance wish to speak, public comments? You do? Okay. If anyone else wants to speak, they're welcome to come up. And then once we've concluded the public portion, we'll close the public hearing, and I'll guide you through the next steps.
Good afternoon, Mr. Brown.
Good afternoon, City Council and Chair and the Planning Board. My name is Tony Brown. I live at 1017 Green Street. I was debating whether to say anything, but because I've been here, just like with the Mayor Pro Tem, since before the concept was taking place. I was Deputy County Manager at the time and was heavily involved from the county's perspective on what was going on with the theater. And I think entertainment is hard. I used to live in California, and I worked at a place called Great America, and I worked with the administrative there. And it's like a place similar to King's Dominion. And talking to the CEO there, he said it's a good year if they break even. So anything we do in entertainment is very difficult. Excuse me. And then with the theater, and also the bad economy a few years after that, it was like a worst case scenario, a storm. But I think it's a great potential for Roanoke Rapids and the area for us to be able to draw more revenue from people going on 95. Part of the reason I want to speak, I contacted Lori. The actual cars per day is about 40,000 cars that pass by at exit 173 each day. You may hear different figures. Part of the reason for that is each car averages 2.5 people. So you may hear sometimes that there was 100,000 people that passed by exit 173. That's why. That's the difference. Sometimes you hear 40,000, sometimes you hear 100,000. It's the people versus the cars that are there. But I just wanted to express my support for the project and making the change to allow the potential for a casino. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Okay, if there's no one else that wishes to speak at this time, I would recommend. Okay, yes, ma'am.
My name is Jan Morgan, part of the business community, been in business for many, many years. Anybody who has concerns, I think they made a good point about the financing. In the past, it was with the city, and that whole project and the elements that went with that are totally different from what we're talking about here. There are no guarantees with what's going on in the legislature. I don't know how long they've been playing with that, but hopefully that will get passed. It would be excellent, in my opinion, from a business perspective for this town, this community. The jobs it's bringing in might not be $100,000 a year jobs, but it gives people an opportunity for a living wage, and I think that's what we need. Littleton has their benefactor, Halifax has, and that's helping them. This is on a whole different level, and I personally think we need it. My taxes here are more than what I paid for a property worth a whole lot more on the Outer Banks, because tourists paid our county and city bills. This is a way to help everybody. There's no way it can affect your tax base going forward, or something seriously wrong, and everybody better pay attention and get involved. So that's all I had to say. It's a whole different ballgame. It's not the same situation at all. There's no county money. There's no city money. It's investors who are fully vested and not, well, that's all I'll say. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else? Mr. Trainer, be appropriate at this time to close the public hearing.
Unless there's anyone else.
Okay, if there's nobody else, I would recommend that the public hearing be closed. Madam Clerk, do those individuals that spoke need to sign this sheet for the hearing? Okay, all right. Okay, we can move forward.
All right, and keep going back to the sense that we are in a joint meeting, and the purpose is for amending our zoning code or land use ordinance. What I'm going to ask is that the city council just kind of allow the planning board to go forth into conducting its business into any discussion, and after any discussion that is necessary by the planning board, move forward into 2 action items for consideration of adoption of the recommendation of consistency as prepared by staff, and then secondly, a motion for providing a recommendation to the city council considering the adoption of the proposed text amendments, unless you have any changes to recommend, to include that in your motion. After your final motion and vote is completed, the recommendation is heard by the city council, and then the city council will follow suit in the 2 actions. So I will allow the planning board, and if you have any questions of staff at this point, that's fine, but the public portion is closed, so no further comments will be taken on that end.
Okay. Thank you. Do we have any other comments or questions, any discussion on the matter before us from the board members?
Madam Chair, I think it was well stated from public comments as well as the mayor and such. When we get ready to vote on consistency, it meet all the requirements for land use ordinance that we're trying to move in a different direction. We want to diversifying where we are right now to improve our lot as well as our citizens and retaining our population. So everything I've heard is positive. I think Ms. Brewer mentioned the word ARPA money, American Rescue Plan and such. Those funds are one time and they're going to go away. And we need to replenish those funds with other sources of revenue and jobs.
Okay. Any other comments, questions from our board? If there are no other, I ask for a motion of recommendation of consistency. Okay. Second? Okay. All in favor? Opposition? Did you get The one opposition? Okay, great. Okay, moving along. I'm asking for a motion and a vote on the adoption of the text amendments as approved. Do we have a motion for that? As proposed? Okay, approved. Will we have a second? All in favor? Any opposition? Okay. All right. So it seems that our board is recommending that we move forward with this. So I think that concludes the planning board's portion of this.
Yes, it does.
Should I close our meeting at this point?
You're welcome to go ahead and do that.
Okay.
That's fine.
All right, ask a motion to adjourn our portion of the meeting. Second? Okay, we're good.
Okay, thank you. All right, City Council, the Planning Board has had its deliberation and has provided a favorable recommendation for approval. And so at this time, we'll move forward with the statement of consistency that's been prepared by staff, consider a motion and a vote, and then a motion and a vote for ordinance 2023.11 concerning the proposed text amendments as drafted. And just so you all know, with the planning board, we will have a brief recess after the action item is taken. So if you don't want to have to get up right away, you've got a few minutes. So any questions of the council before moving forward? Okay. All right, then I'll just ask for a motion concerning a statement of consistency.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we consider adoption of the statement of consistency prepared by the staff.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Ferry, and a second by Councilwoman Bryant. Do we need more discussion on the matter? If there is none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. First motion will be approved.
Mr. Mayor, I would also like to make a motion that we consider adoption of ordinance number 2023.11, approving the proposed text amendments related to permitting the use of property within the entertainment overlay district as a casino, subject to the compliance with state and federal laws.
Also, a motion by Mr. Farabee. Do we have a second to his motion?
Second.
Second by Councilman Smith. Is there any more discussion on this matter? If there is none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. That motion would also be approved, so the request would be approved.
Yes, and for the record, the request is effective upon adoption, so it is now permissible, and that definition will be added to our land use ordinance. So if you go look online tonight, it won't be there. So be patient with us, and we will provide documentation to Mr. White's group about that. Thank you.
Okay. Well, we'll take a brief recess at this time, and you're welcome to stay. Appreciate you all making all that noise and everything so I could use my gavel. It's been a long time. I actually used it twice. I think it's got a crack in it, isn't it? All right, we're at item 5 on our agenda now, and we added a public comment period on here. Mr. Davis, would you want to speak before the comment period, or how do you want me to handle that? Yes, sir. Topic is on the vacancy on the city council.
So just for everybody, and I know that it's been just in my tenure, I think we've had this situation occur twice. So I know everybody sitting on council at this point is probably familiar with it, but for the audience, I'll say when our council seats are nonpartisan, and one of the effects of that is that when a vacancy occurs on city council, there's a process for filling that. We actually have an interesting situation when it comes to the interaction of city charters and state statutes. And so normally, I think most people that have been through a high school civics class understand that, well, if the city can do something, but if the legislature says something different, you generally go by what the legislature says. It's a little bit unusual when you have the case of a city charter, though, because because what happens with the city charter is before a city is established, the legislature has to pass and has to agree to that charter. So the legislature can, in approving a city's charter, authorize them to change some of the processes that are set out in the city statutes, and in that case, what the state statutes say is that the city charter controls. So, in this case, our city charter says that when you have a vacancy occur on city council, that vacancy is that council can fill that vacancy, and that when that vacancy is filled, that person serves for the remainder of the unexpired term of that seat. So, you know, in many state offices, when an office comes vacant, there is an appointment process to fill that temporarily, and then at the next scheduled election or the election following that, depending on when the vacancy occurs, it comes back up for election and basically changes the period, or there's a new election that's held. That doesn't happen in this context, and so and I know that it seems like every time we kind of get into this, there are some questions about that. So I just wanted to cover those bases for everybody initially. In case the public did have comments, since we are going to have public comment in a second, I wanted to go ahead and anticipate that and jump out there. So, as we all know, Mr. Daughtry, who was appointed to fill the unexpired term of former Councilwoman Suetta Scarborough, he is anticipating making a change in his residency. And one of the interesting things about the way that works is that when someone no longer resides in their district, it's instant. Their seat becomes vacant. So Mr. Daughtry did something, and I really appreciate it. I know, and I think at the last council meeting we thanked him for his service, but it was great to have him on council for the short time that we did. But by virtue of him planning on establishing a residence outside of the district, the moment that he did that and basically, started resting his head outside the district, his seat would become vacant. So anticipating that, he went ahead and resigned before that happened, so that there was no question about any kind of future votes or anything like that. So at this point, pursuant to his resignation, the seat is vacant, and it is for council to fill it. Now, we've talked about this before, at previous things, and so I know council has probably heard all this before. I'm going to re-plow that ground for the audience a little bit. There are several options that council could take to fill this vacancy. Neither our charter nor the state statutes say in this context how council has to do that, only that you have the power to do it. And so the first option, the so-called option A, is the one that we have used, and at least during my tenure for the past 2 times we've been in this situation, and that's what I think the city manager has termed the motion and vote method. And basically what happens is that during a meeting, one of the council members makes a motion and says, I move that we appoint John Smith, and I'm just using that name as a blank name, appoint John Smith or John Doe to the vacant council seat for District 1. And then, assuming that gets a second, council votes on that. And if we get if there is if council votes and approves that, then that person comes on and they could be sworn in at the next session and begin to serve for the remainder of that unexpired term. In that context, and I realize this is acute, and I think it's happened twice before. I think both times it occurred this way, where obviously being a 5-person council with a mayor, one person goes, we have a 4-person council. In the case of a tie, that is, 2 council members vote one way, 2 council members vote the other way. In that option A, the mayor can act to break a tie, as would happen in most other normal contexts where we have a tied vote for whatever reason. That's a little bit different in option B, and I think that's where one of the major differences comes. In option B, council could basically basically decide to follow what I would call a nomination kind of procedure. That is, council would have to vote to institute this procedure and basically say, we will take nominations. And again, there's no real guidelines on how to do that, which is always kind of maybe a more difficult thing for city personnel that have to kind of put those into effect sometimes. But basically, council could take nominations, could consider applicants, could debate those, and then at the end of that could basically kind of like the ballot process that we use for a lot of our volunteer boards, where council would take a vote on a ballot, and in that case, in the event of a tie, the mayor does not vote. And so you ask, okay, so what happens then if you're deadlocked? You just go through several rounds of ballots until somebody breaks down. And I know that seems kind of frustrating, but that's kind of the way that this stuff can play out. But in that case, in the nomination ballot process, the mayor does not vote. One thing I will say that I think is very important here is one of the things that the legislature is affirmative about, and that our city charter cannot change, and certainly does not try to change, is that any discussions about filling a vacant seat on city council must be done in public. So this is not something that we can go into closed session and interview candidates or anything, or have a discussion kind of in private about the respective qualifications of different candidates. One of the things that the general statutes is pretty clear on is that it must be done in public, and I know I've always kind of taken the position that as city attorney, what we can do in public, I think probably needs to be done in public as a public board, and I suspect that I'd probably have, without putting words in everybody's mouth, I'd probably have unanimous approval of that on council for that statement. But that's pretty much the situation that we're in a nutshell. I realize it's on to for this tonight. It's really up to council. I don't think in our context, I don't think it would be a good situation for council to leave the seat vacant until the next election. I do think that it is probably just by virtue of city council being a 5-person board, and because we do, sometimes have gotten in situations where we have ties. and because it does kind of start to, the more that we kind of winnow that down, the quicker you run into like quorum issues and things like that. I think it is in council's interest to fill that seat. Now, how council chooses to do that, it doesn't have to do it tonight. Council could say, all right, we're gonna consider this. We're gonna take it up at the next meeting. Council could say, well, we want to, direct city manager, city attorney to hash out a ballot and nomination process where, community input is received or things like that. Those options are all kind of available to council at this point. And I'm sure when we kind of get into it after we hear from public comment, there'll probably be some more kind of particular questions as council members kind of hear their feedback and kind of start to kind of think about how to approach this. So, subject to your questions, that's all I've got at this point. I hope that wasn't too rambling.
So how do we get to where we decide which way we want to move?
Well, I think number one, we go ahead and hear from the public on it. And then once that's done, we move on to the next agenda item at this point, which would be consideration of the District 1 vacancy and how it's going to be filled. And then at that point, anybody can make a motion, just like on anything else, as far as, how they move to do it. And whether that's a motion to name, X person and put it forward to be voted upon, and follow through that process, or whether that's to, motion that we go with the nomination and ballot procedure, and then, as part of that, direct the city manager and city attorney to prepare that process and bring it back at the next council meeting for approval. We can go that route as well.
Okay. All right. That concludes your comments until we hear from the public.
And unless there's any other questions right now.
I've got one question that
Mr. Fairby?
I kind of think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. In relation to, let's say you use option A, could there be more than one person at that particular time?
I think what would happen is and I realize it kind of creates a rush to the door, so to speak. And so, but essentially what would happen is whoever makes the first motion, if there are, for instance, two individuals on council that want to vote for option A, I think the first person to make it makes the motion. If it gets a second, then it goes for discussion as normal. Any other person on the board can ask the person that made that motion to amend their motion. If they say, well, I'm not interested in amending it, then council takes a vote. If it passes, then it passes, and there you go. If it does not pass, then at that point, then I guess if somebody else has another motion to make, they could.
Is that a two-part series? First of all, option, voting on the option, and then the second part would be the person that.
I don't think so. I think it's all just one thing. Because you get there one way or the other. I mean, you can say, all right, we're gonna vote to follow option A and then not name a person in it and go ahead and kind of lock that in. But the problem comes is, okay, so let's say that if for whatever reason, every person on council wants to vote a different person in there, just for example, and so you don't get any majority for any of those, then at that point you don't really get there anyway. So I think just going ahead and putting the person's name in the first motion is probably the best way to approach it. Thank you.
Okay, as far as coming forward and speaking, we didn't have a sign-out sheet up earlier in the, where's it at? I got it now. Okay. What about if I just put it over at the I put it over at the podium, let them sign it when they come up. I only have one name on here. That's all? Okay, I'm sorry.
I think Mr. Browning wanted to.
Okay. Who was the other individual that signed up? Ms. Balmer? Would you like to come on up? It's our process. Just state your name and where you live, if you would.
Okay, I'm Susan Barmer, and I live at 700 Holly Road. And address the mayor for letting me speak. I appreciate that, Mayor Dowdy, and council members. I appreciate your listening to what I have to say. And I will say that was very informative, Mr. Davis. Thank you very much. That really cleared up a lot of the questions that I had, so I do appreciate that. One of the reasons, and I just decided this afternoon to come and to speak, was the fact that we have had a lot of people appointed to this board when it should be someone that's voted in by the public. There was a vacancy after Mr. Bobbitt resigned, and I believe Rex Stainback was appointed. Then when Suetta Scarborough died, then Tommy Daltrey was appointed, and now again Tommy is leaving the district, I understand, and so there will be another appointment. So I'm really kind of concerned that 2 of the 4 council members will have been appointed rather than elected by the people. Now, as I understand from what Mr. Davis said, there's really no getting around that. It is the position that the city council would appoint someone. I do believe that in the last 3 times you have chosen option A. And I will say that there is something about option A that doesn't seem very fair, and that is that whoever speaks the loudest and speaks quickly gets to put someone in nomination when maybe someone else wanted to. That doesn't seem exactly, it just doesn't sound right to me, even if it is legal. The other thing I would like to comment on was the fact that everything has to be done in public. So it seems to me that it's really interesting that in option A, there's a name put forth, someone immediately seconds it, the 2 people that put it in nomination and the person that voted to second it vote for that person, maybe 2 other people don't, and then the mayor breaks the tie. So to me, there had to have been some discussion about that prior to the public meeting. So perhaps things were done not in public. And I'm not pointing any fingers, because I wouldn't have really thought about that until you spoke about the idea of it being in public. I do understand that there's some problems with option B. If I remember correctly, some years back on the county board, there was a time when they went without a chair, and I believe it was Gene Minton, and I believe it was Mr. Pierce, James Pierce. And it went on, and it went on, and it went on. And I think it went on for about a year. They finally reconciled that. I know it's different, but they were able to conduct business. They were able to continue to conduct business with the number that they had and the way that they were voting. I like option B because I think that things should be transparent. I think it would be nice to have nominations for people to self-nominate, to write something about their views, their beliefs, their values, why they want to be on the council, and it would be nice to even have a public forum where the public could hear that. But And then people would know what people have based their decision on. And so that's basically all I have to say, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Baum.
With me. For anyone who has had knee surgery, surgery is the easy part. It's when you meet Colonel Klink at the therapy office. A lot of fun. My name is Gregory Browning. I'm not a city resident, but I live in the ETJ of the city of Roanoke Rapids, and I anticipate at some point in the future that my community will be annexed into the city. May not be tomorrow, but I think it's going to happen. I'm a realistic person. I thank you, Ms. Barnes, for your comment. I was thinking along those lines, but I'm thinking too, option A and option B to appear to be a popularity contest. Do we get to hear the qualifications, experience of people being considered? So, and I believe in transparency, this is democracy. So therefore, as we're choosing, or you're choosing the best person possible to lead our city forward, I think it's incumbent that we know their skill sets and what the city council is looking for to bring them on as a team player for the good of the city. So if Mr. Davis, Jeff Davis, if it's permissible, if he could give us some kind of guidance that you'll be using rather than a popularity contest, that you use the term John Smith, I think. There's nobody going to be submitted named John Smith, I hope. Okay. Sorry, Mr. Smith. If he could explain to us that particular process, what it is that you're looking for, and when I become a city resident, what I'll be looking for. So I didn't get a chance to well, anyway, if you could cover that, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
I can address those kind of.
Is anybody else wants to speak? Lady?
I think so.
Okay.
Do you want me to do this first and then so that it's timely? I'm going to come back to Mr. Browning's comments, but I wanted to kind of touch on two things that I kind of thought about or kind of, I don't want to say responses, because that kind of implies something adversarial, but maybe kind of additions based on Ms. Barmer's comments. I think the first option is you are correct that I think you kind of heard me correctly that there's really not an option to submit this to the voters until the next election. Council could decide that we want it to be filled by the next election. We don't want to put somebody in there, and if council chose to do that, they really wouldn't have to do anything other than just keep the seat vacant. That is, just don't act on it. And there's nothing that says that you have to do it. I think for city procedures, it's important to have a full board. Even if that may not be able to be filled as you know, folks that would prefer to have it elected would like. That's just a function of our charter, and if they're just for public information, anything, you know, that is, a charter can be amended. There's a complicated process for doing it, and again, it has to be approved by the legislature, but that could be changed. Going to what Mr. Browning said, and this kind of, I guess, kind of intersects with another kind of response to Ms. Balmer. When I said that deliberations on this have to be in public, one of the things that I do want to kind of clarify that, I think one of the things that any person on city council, the mayor, the other council members do as part of their function on public boards, they have constituents. And so I don't ever want to say that in what is essentially an administrative decision like this. Now, there's another kind of decision where I would have a different approach, and that's what's called a quasi-judicial decision. That's in very limited context, and we're not there. But in normal administrative decisions, I want to be very clear that as part of a council member's function to their constituents, they can always go out and talk with other members of the community. They can talk amongst themselves individually. What they cannot do, though, is they cannot get together, everybody, where they would have a quorum in a meeting outside of a meeting and discuss city business, because that violates open meetings laws. And so by the same token, the only way that functionally, and so I guess to be more specific on that, what I mean by it has to be discussed in open session is our council together in the aggregate couldn't get together tonight after the meeting, at somebody's house or, at Ruby Tuesdays or somewhere and sit down and say, all right, let's discuss who we're going to put in this council seat. They can't do that. Because that would be essentially having a meeting without noticing the meeting and giving the public a chance to be here. But they can, individually amongst themselves, they can talk to their constituents. They can, one council member can call another council member or call the mayor and say, look, I've been thinking about this council vacancy. I think that this is the person that we need to put in there. They can have those discussions. And that is perfectly legal. So I just want to go ahead and kind of give that clarity. And I know that, people may have different approaches to that. Well, that really may not necessarily seem exactly democratic or in keeping with, what we're kind of taught in elementary school as far as representative democracy. I'll say to the other part, though, that one of the things when you elect somebody, whether it's on council, whether it's as a congressperson or anything like that, is they do, one of the reasons you're doing that is so that they can have those discussions and kind of put in that time to kind of come to those decisions. So I know that's probably a lot more than I had to speak on that, but I just wanted to kind of cover all those bases. With respect to Mr. Browning's questions, though, with respect to qualifications and guidance and things like that, there's really not any specific thing that we have to do with this. That is, it's completely up to council how they choose to fill it. And if there's no legal requirement that council has to, interview an applicant or hear their qualifications or even say why they think that a person would be the right person for the job. Like I say, they can just make the motion, put the person's name in it, and if it passes by a majority, that's what it is. But certainly, certainly there's nothing out of place or untoward about council saying, giving that context and saying, a council member that is that's going to make a motion and vote. And I just used John Smith like John Doe as first thing that came to mind, but I know what you mean. I didn't think of that we've got we got a couple, but the council could it would a council member that is going to make that motion could certainly discuss why they're taking making that decision. Two, members of the public could get up and say, well, I think this person is the right person for the job, and here's why, X, Y, and Z. And by the same token, somebody that wanted to put their name in the hat, so to speak, could stand up and say, I think that I'm the right person for this job, or I'd like to serve. There's nothing out of place about that. And so I wanted to kind of cover those bases, and I know there's probably some other folks here who want to speak. So, and if anybody else has not had an opportunity to speak yet, the sign-up sheet is here. Certainly, I don't want anybody to feel like they wanted to speak and didn't get the opportunity to. So.
I'd just like to say that I wasn't implying that anyone had done anything illegal. But I was speaking to the idea of transparency, and there are things that are legal, but you also want to think about the spirit of transparency, and that was really what I was speaking to. That that everything should be out in the open, and so you should meet the spirit part of it as well as the legality. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name's Erin Hutchings. I live at 800 Jackson Street. This actually affects the ward that I live in. I live in Ward 1, which Mr. Stainback currently represents. Mr. Daughtry has stepped down. I think, though Mr. Stainback's doing a wonderful job, he was appointed. And I really feel that the next person elected to that chair really should be elected by the people who live in that ward and not by a board up here. That's my opinion as someone who lives in that ward. I think that it needs to be an election. I don't know what the laws are in North Carolina as far as getting having the election in November or having to hold a special election. I know that the city of Roanoke Rapids decided not to have a precinct election here in town, that you have to go in November to Halifax. I don't know if it's something that can go with that during that time am I making any sense? You're looking at each other. Or if it can be.
I'm not sure exactly what you're speaking about. Mr. Davis.
So there's an election going on in November.
Yes, ma'am.
And there's a election going on for a Ward 1 seat already. You have
Yes.
3 contenders in that. So you can choose to either take the top 2 from that election or hold a special election.
I can probably answer that. So we're actually not, functionally, we just don't have the authority to do that. We can't call a special election for it. The only way to get that authority would be for city council to move to amend its charter and then have the legislature essentially approve the amendment of our city charter.
So what about the top 2 that are running? There's 3 people running for the ward. That can't be?
We would have to amend the charter to essentially kind of set up that process. Council could always agree to follow that. They could agree
Right.
to, all right, we're going to hold the seat vacant, and then whoever, these are the individuals that have, expressed the desire to run, and so then, see how that turns out, and then in, I guess in December, vote that second highest vote getter in. They can do that kind of tacitly, but as far as, passing a motion now to do it, I don't think it would pass legal muster, because we don't have the authority to kind of.
They don't have the authority to hold it?
That's right.
You talked about the ability to be able to have an election,
Yeah.
didn't you?
Yeah. Well, the only way to do it would be to amend the charter. And like I say, there's enough hurdles to that. It's not something that you can just do. It's like amending a constitution.
I would think that'd be a lot more fun. All right, well, I appreciate your time. It just seemed like the answer to me would be to have somebody from Ward 1 speak on behalf of someone getting elected versus.
Situations like this is exactly why people should come to council meeting, because you learn a lot.
I agree. I was amazed that 2 weeks ago.
I didn't know the answer to your question.
There was
either.
125 people here, 130 people here, and tonight for this, well, if y'all weren't here and the planning board wasn't here, I mean, there wouldn't be anyone, it's sad, it really is. I think more people need to get involved.
Come back anytime.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, there was a lot of discussion from all of us the last time that we went through an appointment. I'm certainly not in favor of B, because I know what would happen with that. I am in favor of A. However, I would like to know who is interested, and that person comes and talk about themselves or what they can do for the city, and then we make that same decision that we would with a nomination. Now, if we don't, my answer would certainly be no to somebody, because I don't know them all. I don't know who's even, who's even considering. So my answer would be no to one side, and it will be no probably. So it seems to me that a person could come and say they're interested, And then even if not tonight, at the next meeting, we could say, hey, we want to make a nomination based on whatever, or we want to make a nomination that John Smith, using that same, John Smith again, and I know John Smith, so would be that it would be nominated by us. Same thing, but again, I would like to see those interested to come forward and at least tell who they are.
I'd just like to question, can that be done with option A, or does that have to be done under option B? Because B says, if I understood correctly, nominations and ballot. So someone could self-appoint or be nominated by someone. I just feel like we need to know something about the people.
So,
And I'm opposed to number A. If one person makes a nomination, somebody else seconds it, and the mayor approves it, and we don't even get a chance to even consider a second or a third person. So in that case, I would prefer option B, because at least we have an option of letting people, hearing from people that are interested in serving, and letting them let us know why they feel they are qualified and what they would like to see done to improve our city. I think we all have ideas and a dream of what we would like, and I'd like to. I want to hear from the people.
I do too, but my comment was based on hear from the people, and then we make the selection from what we hear from the people.
Okay.
I think you can essentially get there under option A if that's what council chose to do. Council could essentially kind of effect that process through basically, I guess, taking a vote tonight to say, all right, we're going to vote to continue this matter to, a future meeting. And then at that meeting, hear from anyone who's interested. And then certainly once that process is completed and you've heard from everybody, you get to option A eventually one way or the other. There's no way to kind of lock in to something other than, just deferring the question. City manager did remind me of something about the nomination and ballot method, that is, so to speak, option B, is that when you would have those ballots, it would say, you'd have the list of names eventually, and it would say yes, no. And so you would go through and you'd kind of check down yes, no. And so eventually you're eventually going to get into an option A kind of situation. The problem is you're not going to have a tiebreaker. And so you can deadlock in option B. And I think that to me, from a procedural standpoint, is probably the thing that bothers me most about option B, is the deadlocking of it.
How can you mean on voting on if you got two candidates that, go ahead, Ms. Trainer.
And this is something that we can look into, but I think that the mayor could vote under option B only if you have to have the number and account for affirmatives, like voting in the affirmative and voting in dissension, essentially. So the typical ballot process, just you select a name, and whoever has the most votes wins. But in a nomination and ballot method where the mayor could potentially vote, would have to have it delineated yes and no per candidate so that you can know exactly where the affirmative is and not on the record. Essentially, you really just kind of get back to option A with that, if that makes sense here. So you have to have,
confused.
so if you pass out a ballot with candidate A, or it has the candidates on there, you would have,
Say if we have 3 candidates.
if you have 3 candidates, then it's yes or no, yes or no, yes or no. So each member of council would have to have it, okay, where did you vote yes? Okay, and then you voted no on the others. So you'd have to know where the vote stands, just like if you were doing it in open session with ayes or nays or, and so forth. But you'd have to check every box for each candidate to determine who would have the highest number of votes. And then you rotate that until you have a successful candidate. If there's 3, then depending on the voting, if there was a majority in one way, then we announce the results there. But essentially, it's doing your voting on paper.
I wouldn't, again, I don't know if you answered my question or not in relation to, I wouldn't have a problem with the candidates, if we want to call them candidates, or those that were interested would say, you know what, I'm interested, I live at I'm John Smith, and I live at 123, whatever, and I work at whatever the case may be. And then Jane Smith comes and says, I live at blah, 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 and do that thing. At that point, we're still looking at option A. And at that point, after we hear from them, then we make a decision who we appoint. We appoint from the groups that come forward and say that. At least we know and have heard from somebody and know more than one party or both parties, at least something about them. So option, I don't see that option. That would not be an option A. That all we're doing is just delaying the actual appointment until we hear, and we've done similar things before, until we hear who they are.
Well, and that's why I don't want to speak for the city
we would
attorney,
still
but
have that option.
we advise
the mayor
you.
would still,
Our job
if it's a tiebreaker, he could still do
to
that.
advise of the options, and it's council's decision as to which method you want to choose.
Well, I mean, I would like to see a delayed option A.
That's certainly available if that's something that the
Can we
council
do it with a
wants to
call
do.
meeting? Can we do that with a call meeting? Just have that one thing on the agenda and go ahead and do it,
Yeah, I don't
in the
see any
next few
reason-
days?
Yeah, as long as we kind of go through the procedure of setting up a call meeting, I don't see why we couldn't.
Mr. Mayor, I think that most of the people on council have had phone calls already about everybody that wants to run. I know my phone's rung off the hook. I know yours is run off the hook. And I know that Rex's phone's run off the hook. And there's been 3 people that's been requesting that wants to be appointed. And I think that we're well aware of the people that want to be appointed instead of going through the process. So I don't know what's the question is that everybody wants to delay everything. It's my question is, I don't care. I know the mayor's going to be gone the 19th, so we can't do it on the 19th.
Well, again,
And then we've got a decision that we make in October before we put anybody on. And I think each one of us sitting on council has enough sense to point somebody in here that's going to try to help move the city forward. If we don't, then the public in our district can vote us out the next time that we are on there.
the problem with that is, let's just use another scenario. Let's just say that you are voting for the city attorney. Let's use someone else. Let's say that you are voting for Sally Doe. I may not know Sally Doe or anything about Sally Doe. I may be voting for John Smith because I know about John Smith. Now, at the voting time frame, let's just say that you vote for Sally. Let's say Rex vote for Sally because he knows Sally. I don't know Sally. So my vote for Sally would be no because I don't even know Sally. Now, I may know Sally's name, again, it sounded like it's who's the quick draw McGraw on that.
Yeah.
So to alleviate that, and we had a long conversation the last time about this same thing, but to alleviate that, at least we hear from the candidates or possible people, and then we still make that same vote. We still make that same nomination based on, you know what, I've heard this person, I do know who they are.
Well,
and then we make that same nomination.
Well, I think the last time that we had a vote that you made the first nomination, you were the quick draw, McGraw, as you said, and then I made a motion after you made a motion. So we're going to end up doing something that we think that the council, and I think that the council has the right person on it.
Well,
I just think council needs to know who they are.
At the same time, on the last time we looked at that, I happened to know Tommy, and Sandra didn't really know Tommy.
I knew of Tommy. I didn't really know him.
So all I'm saying is, let us get to know, and then make that same decision by saying, you know what, I nominate whoever, and then we still make a yay or a nay. The mayor will still have that same option of breaking the tie, but at least we've heard from the people that is interested in doing that. Because I've got somebody in mind. I'm sure you got somebody different in mind, and I don't know your person.
Well, you should make an effort to get to know her.
They have an opportunity to know us if they come and present.
But after the fact, it may be after the fact. You see what I'm saying? I don't even know who you.
We don't seem to be getting anywhere fast with what we're doing right now. In speaking amongst ourselves, as we seem to be doing here, like Ms. Bryant said she would be gone next week, I think, and then I would miss the September 2nd meeting. Sir?
Are we in a rush?
So if we don't, get something done tonight, it would either have to be a call meeting or it would have to be the first meeting in October. But, it's up to the council I'm just stating a fact.
I mean, I just think it make it more palatable, because the last time we did that, there were some differences of opinion, and even though we mend pretty quick, it's still a difference of opinion.
So can I get some kind of a consensus? Yes, sir. The hearing's still open. Are we? Okay. Go ahead. I can't call it.
Brown.
Mr. Brown, go ahead. Oh, yes, ma'am. Ms. Lewis. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Just in listening and the public comments that are being made, would it be fair to ask if the nominees that are interested are actually here tonight? And if so, could you at least introduce them at this point, if they're interested, so it could get the process started maybe, and actually have them come up, introduce themselves, and then you could move into selection maybe next meeting. But if they're here already, they could come, make their comments at least, introduce themselves, and let us know who they are. So as the public, that would open that up to us.
The city attorney made comment people could still speak if they wanted to. So what's your thoughts on that, Mr. Davis?
So, and of course the city manager and I are sitting here kind of discussing this. So my thoughts on that are this, is, certainly anybody that's here tonight could speak. I do have concerns about giving a fair, if we're essentially going to solicit that, I do feel like there needs to be it needs to be solicited kind of on a fair basis. And so, if we were going to give that opportunity, I think it would need to be something where gave some notice and said, all right, come and tell us why you want it, essentially. If that's something the council wanted to do, rather than just kind of, throwing it here kind of at the end of the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
I think after listening to Mr. Farabee, I mean, that makes sense to hear about people. I mean, people that are on the city council, it's not a popularity contest, and that's not why we elected the people that are on there. We elected them because of their gifts, their experience, what they can bring to Roanoke Rapids. A lot of times we do like to have people on there that have lived in Roanoke Rapids for a while, that kind of thing. But just because, I mean, every one of you should have been contacted by the people that are interested in being on the city council, not just a few of you. And they should have come to your house or met you out for coffee, sat down and talked to you and told you what they can do for Roanoke Rapids, what their vision is for Roanoke Rapids. I mean, I'm still living here and I'm not sure why, except that I can't get my husband to move. And if I'm going to live here, I want Roanoke Rapids to be better. I've gotten recently involved in the Arts Council, so hoping that if we have a vibrant Arts Council, that's going to move Roanoke Rapids forward. And, we all can't be on the city council. But I do think you should want to hear from everybody that's interested. I mean, it just doesn't, October, oh, come on, y'all, really. 1 month.
Okay. I think we've probably pretty much heard. I know you already spoke one time. What comments we might get, but anyway, I need some direction from the council.
I would like to make a motion that we adopt a delayed option A, that we hear from the candidates and vote on, but we nominate from the candidates that we hear, which I don't see why we couldn't get all that done by our October meeting. Run something saying, we're looking at a candidate that the city is going to be electing is going to be appointing a person out of the district, and if you're interested, come that night and we'll make that same decision from the people that talk that same night, and it will be the same process. The same process would be who we appoint, with option A being that if it is a tie, and again, I'm sorry, I don't like the non-tiebreaker situation in B. I like the A, but at least the candidates will be considered. That was my thing the last time. The candidate that was interested never got considered because one was faster than the other in saying who it would be. And again, I know the mayor you did break a tie. Mm-hmm. so it wasn't like I was the first one on board and it didn't.
If I could call a point of order, could I get Mayor Pro Tem Kirby to restate your motion?
I don't think you made the motion yet, no.
I did make a motion.
Restate it, Cole.
I made a motion that we consider option A a delayed option A, which means the candidate would come at a call meeting or our next meeting, speak, and then we appoint from who comes up and we talk to us. At least each one had a chance to express themselves. You know, let's just say again, I'd say, okay, I nominate John Smith. Then that's it. John Smith is the only one that's even going to be considered out of, it may be one other person or two other people. So at least allow John and Sally and Jane to come and express themselves and tell who they are or whatever, and then from that we do option A, which is we make an appointment from those that is before us. And that gives all of our citizens the feeling that they have at least been considered.
So are you saying to do that with the first meeting in October, and so that we have time to make people?
Will we have time to get something out? And yes, we will have time. The first meeting in October. What's that date? 3.
Because Ms. Bryant said she would not be here for the next meeting either, correct?
Well, I was gonna come right back for that. I will be out of town next week, and.
We're saying October the 3rd.
But if I have to, I can come back on the 19th. I was planning to come back just for this meeting on the 19th.
Will we have time by the 19th or the first meeting in October?
I won't be here on the 19th.
You won't be on
Could
here.
have
You won't be here on the 19th, right?
Mm-mm.
Well, October the 1st. I mean October the 3rd. That's my motion that we delayed making this decision, allowing the candidates to come and speak, and then we make that appointment from those that speak on October the 3rd.
At the last meeting, Mr. Farabee made some of the same comments that he's making tonight about we might end up as a council with the same result. But he was requesting that all the individuals be recognized that wanted to be appointed. So I would just ask that you keep that in mind. We represent all the people, all the time, not some of the people. So we need to try to come up with something that we can move on with at this time.
If that's a motion, I'll second
Well,
it.
I can't make a motion.
No, I made the motion.
Mayor,
Ma'am?
I was seconding, yes.
All right, would you restate it,
Mayor
Mr.
Pro
Farabee?
Tem.
Can you read it back? Because I can't.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
I think that you made a motion to consider a delayed option A and hear from the candidates at the next meeting, which I think you said October 3rd, and then make an appointment at that meeting.
Correct.
Is that okay?
Yes. And Sandra, you seconded that?
I was second it, yes.
All right, we got a motion and a second. Any more discussion on the matter? If there is none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Your motion was to be approved. And state it back one more time for us. It's getting late. I don't think he voted.
I didn't vote. Such thing.
So that's considered an affirmative.
Yep.
October the 3rd, and that would not, the number 3 has been recognized, but that would go, I mean, that would be a public, anybody that wants to come and be considered. Can we limit them to 3 minutes or 5 minutes? I mean, can we put a limit on it, not like a public hearing where they can talk as much as they want to? Well, 5 would be okay. Most people probably won't take that long. Cool. Okay, we finally had a motion and a vote, and the vote was approved. Is there any other business that needs to come before the council tonight? Okay, motion to adjourn.
I make the motion, adjourn.
Second motion, Mr. Stainback. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.